Okay, it's January 9th, 2019. We're talking to Bob, and he's talking about his life as it relates to alien contacts. This is part 3.
Okay. We left off with me getting an introduction to this angel. So for a number of years I called him Archon. I didn't know what else to call him. And the time did come in, I believe it was the mid-1970s when he told me his actual name, Michael. I asked why he didn't tell me before. He said if I did, it might have been more than you could have dealt with, or it may have gone to your head, and I didn't want to risk that. He said, I wanted you to get to know me first. Well, I've known him a long time ago in a life I lived 2,000 years ago in this world. He's been a teacher of mine in a number of different lives. I know, excuse me, I know that as time went on in the early 70s, I continued going to different metaphysics and spiritually oriented meetings and prayer meetings, and my skills kept on growing exponentially again, and they just kept on. At one point, I had talked with my mom about something Archon Michael did, and this was a Saturday evening. I remember that, and she got fed up hearing about it. She said, you know, all I hear about these days is Archon this, Archon that. Oh, he can fly. Oh, Archon can do this. Archon can do that. And, you know, I remember thinking, well, if my mom doesn't understand me, who will? Anyway, I was getting a bit enamored and somewhat dependent upon Archon at that time. And he taught me not to. Anyway, get to that a little later. I went on back over to the cottage where I was living, a mother-in-law cottage my dad built for my grandmother who had passed on. And next morning my phone rings, it's my mom. And she sounds like she's been crying. Bob, you've got to come over here, I've got to talk to you. I said, what's wrong? She said, just come over here. And I did. She had been crying quite a bit. She said, first promise me, when I'm through talking to you, you'll go back to the cottage and pray or meditate, however it is you do it, get in touch with Archon and apologize to him for me. And I said, apologize? Why? How come? She said, I'll tell you, but just promise. So I promised. She said that she had about 10 minutes sleep that night. That in that quick time she had had a dream that she was in this white temple that had a whole bunch of steps leading in white marble and fluted columns and, you know, I guess very Grecian style. And that when she went inside this temple, she saw, and again it was like white marble floors, she saw a whole group of people in a circle, like throngs of people. And Archon was standing in the middle of them. She said head and shoulders above them, height-wise. And they were asking questions and he was answering them left and right. And then he turned and saw her and walked out of the temple. She said she could hear in the dream his boots clicking on the marble floor. And as he got to the steps and then turned past one of the columns, one of the pillars, and disappeared, she said all of a sudden her feet, the bottom of both of her feet began itching so badly it woke her up and she couldn't sleep the rest of the night because they were giving her a fit. I went back home, true to my word. I went into a meditation to try to contact Archon. Next thing, all of a sudden, I'm out of body in space over the Earth. And Archon's out there letting go of this huge, well, not huge, but this oblong, dark drab thing, and I didn't know what it was. And I said, wait a minute, this happens to be my planet. What are you letting go of in space over my planet? And his first words were, let's just say I'm, and then all of a sudden, we're in a different place. We're in a small, narrow kitchen I did not recognize, kind of modern for that time. Got to remember, this was like in the 70s. He was wearing, instead of his normal robe or tunic, he was wearing a white buckskin tunic with long fringe, kind of popular kind of style back then, sort of hippie-ish. And he was holding a frying pan with some weird looking bacon in it. And didn't notice any grease there though. And he said, cooking something up. So if you put these together, let's just say I'm cooking something up. And then I said, okay, whatever. But then I said, you know, my mom wants me to apologize for her to you, and I don't appreciate if you did anything that hurt her. To which he said, I did nothing to her. This is her own health issue. He said, she has nothing to apologize to me for. You tell her that. I did. We found out a year or so later she had diabetes, and this is part of the nerve damage that happens on the bottom of many diabetics' feet. Okay. Not long after that, and you probably, some of you may remember this, we had what they call the handshake in space, where an American Apollo capsule joined with docked with a Russian Soyuz capsule, but there was a docking hatch that made that possible. That's exactly what Archon was letting go of in space years before. Same thing, same look. Okay, the kitchen I told you about, that one happened a little later. In 1976, I moved out of the mother-in-law cottage to a set of apartments around the block from where I was living. And the kitchen in that apartment was the exact same kitchen that Archon and I had been standing in while he was holding the frying pan. Incidentally, the bacon, it was a soy concentrate bacon, which I was eating at that time. Not at the time he first showed it to me, when I moved into that apartment. That's when I was trying to lose weight, and I was eating a soy concentrate bacon that didn't, you know, produce much grease or anything like that. In the same frying pan, in fact, that I had to work with. Anyway, something that happened in connection with that kitchen. One evening I was preparing some supper. It was in November of 1976. Archon came to me. Michael, actually, I knew his name by then. And said, you're going to be baptized again. To which I said, I don't need to be. I was baptized when I was 6 years old. My mom was afraid I wouldn't be alive very long because of my tonsils, so she took me across the street to the church to be baptized. And he said, don't argue. You're going to be baptized again. You have to do this before you're going to be able to do what you're about in this life. And so I listened, doubting everything I was hearing. Not always, but a lot of times I argue with him and find out that the arguments mean nothing because he's right. He said, you will be baptized by your cousin who's a minister. At that time, he was a youth minister in a church in Ohio. Well, I knew this part was false because my cousin had already contacted his mom, who lived in the same city that, you know, my parents and I lived in, and had told them that he was not going to be able to come down for Christmas that year, that their main minister was going to be gone. He would have to substitute in for him. So I knew that had to be false. Then Michael said, "You will be baptized on Christmas Eve day in 30-degree weather in a swimming pool consecrated for baptism that your cousin will know about, that was set up that way before he left to go up to Ohio." Well, I'm doubting all of this. And then he says, "By the way, further confirmation if you need it, this winter it will snow in Florida, and the snow will stick on the ground for 3 days. It'll be that cold." And at that point I'm thinking, well, bullshit, 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 bullshit. My answer was, "I don't believe any of this, but thank you for your input." Next day I get a call from my mom. "Hey, guess what? Your cousin's going to be able to come down to visit after all. Something changed all of a sudden, and he's going to be able to come down to visit for Christmas." And I stood there and went, "Oh my God." And then, and I don't mean the initials OMG, I said the words. My mom asked why. I explained to her, and then she contacted her sister, who contacted my cousin. I didn't tell my cousin anything about Michael. He comes to visit me about a week before Christmas at my apartment and says, "Bob, the only time I can baptize you, because I'm seeing a lot of friends this week, the only time I have free is going to be Christmas Eve afternoon sometime." And I'm sitting there thinking, oh God. I started laughing. He asked why I'm laughing. I said, "Never mind." Then he said, "And I know of a swimming pool." Now, who would think of being baptized in a swimming pool? I never would have. He said, "I know of a swimming pool that was consecrated for baptism before I went up to Ohio." And I'm thinking again, oh God. Well, as it turned out, I was baptized at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in 30-degree weather in an unheated swimming pool consecrated for baptism on Christmas Eve day. Just like Michael said, word for word for word for word. And that January, it snowed in Florida, and the snow stayed on the ground and car bumpers for 3 days because it was so cold it wouldn't melt. Everything he said came true. He's been that way in my life this lifetime. I think in others too. He, at one point, one afternoon, I was meditating and I felt his presence. Now I have to explain, for me, when I meditate, it's between me and God. But this one afternoon, I felt Michael's presence, and he said, "My wings protect you and my spirit or soul overshadows you," meaning protecting. And I said, "That's cryptic. Now what does that mean?" And he said, "You'll find out." Somehow that doesn't make me feel peaceful and happy hunky-dory, you know. He can be cryptic at times. It's like I have to go through my life and live it. That's the way it is. And make my decisions as I go, because they're my decisions, not his. Well, anyway. That afternoon, that next afternoon, I had been teaching school, a little town north of the city that I lived in. And I was taking 2 teachers with me to take them back to where they could get another ride to get back to their places, because the ride they came to work with that day got the flu and had to go home early. As we were riding along, and I'm in this Toyota Corolla, my first car in fact, this pickup truck sideswipes me. I had to try to drive up partly on the raised median area in the road to avoid being hit too hard. The police came, filled out accident reports, all that kind of stuff. It was the other guy's fault. I got home that afternoon, calmed down, sat down to meditate. Michael came through and said, "Now you know what I was telling you about." Well, I had contacted my insurance because I knew there had to be damage, at least some damage to the side of the car where I got hit by the truck. My mom comes over the next day and says, "Call your insurance company, they don't need to do anything." I said, "What?" She said, "Well, I just washed the tire tread marks off. The paint isn't even damaged." I went out and looked at it where it looked like there might have been a bit of a dent the day before. There wasn't even any dent. So yes, I guess Michael did protect us. There was a time when I began to put too much emphasis on Michael. Archon, as I was still calling him way back before that, before I knew his actual name. And he actually pulled away from me for over half a year. It was okay with me. I don't mean any disrespect, but you know, it was okay with me. He has taught me numerous times that I'm not supposed to have a dependency on him, and he's right. A relationship with God comes first, and even that should not be a dependency. So, relationship with an angel can be nice, but it should not be the be-all of everything, the be-all end-all of everything. It shouldn't. Again, my skills were increasing big time. Found out about this Israeli psychic by the name of Uri Geller. I began trying to do some of the stuff he did, like bending things and nothing would happen. I tried moving objects with telekinesis, got very little results. Which is funny because when I was a little kid, I got a chemistry set for Christmas. Back in the 50s and 60s, the kid turns 11 or 12, you give him a chemistry set for Christmas. Anyway, in this chemistry set was a radiometer, which looks like a big light bulb without the light filament in there. It's got a little pinwheel with it looks like a little pinwheel. It spins around if you put it where the sun can shine on it. I used to hold it and pass my hand over it, and like I said, I was a kid. It was a game. It was something to have fun doing, and that was it. I didn't understand how I was doing it. I didn't care. It was just a fun thing to do. And the pinwheel would go crazy, jumping up and down, trying to bust out of the top of the bubble because it was going so fast. I remember my Mom's sister was visiting us one afternoon, and I was standing in the living room doing this, and, you know, passing my hand over this bubble. And she jokingly said, "Oh, he's the sun." And I remember thinking, in more ways than you know. I didn't say anything. As I grew up, people would say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I would start to say, minister. A minister. I knew I didn't dare say the word Messiah. Enough of that for now. As time went on, I continued to have an ongoing relationship with Michael as my teacher, and he actually basically kind of stepped back in my life and let me live my life, which is what any true guide is supposed to do. If they tell you what to eat and how to live, they're not a guide. Be careful. I'm going to call it quits on that one point so that we can pick up with a different facet of my life after this.